It's Romanian. Yeah, I guess I'm Reichenbach to do a Romanian. Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry, this week I literally had 4 nights in a row of events. Actually, I had tonight too, 5 nights in a row, but Okay, here we are. We're starting a new parak, Baruch Hashem. We're in Maseches Chullin Daf Mem Beis and Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, and we're beginning a parak of Elu Trefos. I am going to be purchasing the book Shchitas. What's it called? Shchitas Chullin? Sichas Chullin? Sichas? Colorful one? No.
Not colorful.
No.
No, there are colorful books also.
There's a colorful one. I thought it was Shchitas Chullin. So that will help us. Tonight, the only thing we really need to know is that the stomach of an animal that chews its cud has 4 compartments, which we're going to be learning about briefly. But let's jump in right away to the Mishnah on the top of Mem Beis Amud Aleph that speaks about the various trefos. Number 1, Elu trefos bebehema. Here are the trefos of an animal. Number 1 is Nekuva saveshes. We know that if the esophagus has a puncture in it, you're done. That means the animal's a trefa. Upsukas hagar geres. We know that under certain circumstances, when there is a tear in the gargeris, which is the kana, which is the trachea, that's problematic. Nikev krum shel moach. If the membrane that surrounds the brain gets poked, the behema will be a trefa. Nikev halev lebeis chalolo. If the heart has a puncture in it, but it has to be lebeis chalolo, not just in the muscle, not just in the wall of the heart, but it has to be into the chamber of the heart, which poses fascinating questions. Let's say, for example, an adult has to have an injection in his heart in order to keep him alive, and you puncture through. Does that make him a trefa halachically? These are fascinating questions. Again, we're talking about behema, but is there a transference to other places? If the spine breaks and the spinal cord is torn, then the animal becomes a trefa. Nital hakaved. If the liver is removed, velo nishtayer hemena klum. It's asking for a drasha. What do those words mean? That you're saying both, that it's removed and there's nothing left. Not for today, but we'll get there. Hareya shenikva o shechasra. If the lung is pierced or if it's missing something. Reb Shimon Omer ad shetinakev lebeis ha simponos. If you want to know where the word symphony comes from, it's from an early old word, certainly in the times of the Mishnayos. So the word symphony is old. I don't know if the roots are Hebrew or if the roots were from another religion, but it's certainly found in the Mishnayos from Kimat 2,000 years ago, and that was already the word. And what it means over here is that into the bronchioles, into the space where air travels. So it's not just that there's a nekev; it's a nekev into the open airspace within the lungs. Nikva hakeba, the stomach. Nikva hamara, the gallbladder. Nikvo hadakin, the intestines. Hakeres, which is one part of the stomach, hapnimis, shenikva o shenikva rova chitzona. If it was pierced or torn, the majority of the outside. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, hagdola tefach b'aketana beruva. What is this talking about? A very clarifying Rashi. Rashi's halfway down, 15, 20 lines into the new parak. Tibur maschel gedola ktana. Listen to Rashi. Lav gasa b'daka kamar. We're not talking about a gdola is a gasa and a ktana is a daka. That's not what we're saying. Ella al shor katan v'shor gadol. It's just the physical size within the behema. We're not talking about a daka. If it's gedola, so then the tear that we're talking about is a tefach, and if it's ktana, it's beruba, then it's 51%. We'll get into all this later. Meses, which is one of the stomachs. Ubeisa kosas, another one of the stomachs. Shenikvu lachutz, that's going to be a trefa. If an animal was nafla min agag, if it fell, even if we don't otherwise know what's going on, the animal is considered a trefa. Nishtabu rov tzal oseh, if 51% of its ribs are broken. I know it's not 51%, but I don't know how many ribs behemoths have. I guess it depends on what kind of behemoth you're talking about. Let's call it a dozen. So when 7 of them are, what do humans have? I think we have 13. But either way, could be wrong about that. But if most of the ribs are broken, then the animal is going to be a trefa. Udrusas haze'ev, if a wolf clawed a behema, then it's going to be considered a trefa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, drusas haze'ev bedaka, the wolf is only going to be considered a trefa for a behema that's clawed by a wolf is true by a daka. And a drusas ari begasa, for a larger animal, for a cow, a wolf that slashes it or that claws it would not ruin it, but rather only if a lion does. speaking about drusa, which is clawing, drusas hanetz be'ov hadak. If you have a smaller bird, then only drusas hanetz. Drusas hanetz is an animal, is a bird that is a prey bird, and therefore it claws eagles, those kinds of birds, vultures. And if they claw a small bird, if the drusas hanetz is going to be true by of hadaku, drusas hagas be'ov gas with a zayin is a correction over here. Otherwise, the words are exactly the same. The gaz is also a prey bird, but bigger, and that's true for be'of hagas, for a larger bird. Ze'aklal kol she'en kamoa chaya treifa. Anything that won't be able to stay alive as is will be considered a treifa. End of Mishnah. The Gemara opens and says, Amar of Shimon ben Lakish, Remez l'treifa min haTorah minayin. How do we even know there is such a principle of treifa in Chumash? Says the Gemara, by reading Chumash. It's not a very complicated way. What do you mean minayin? That's a ridiculous question. Ubasa b'sada treifa lo sochelu. I don't. This is not complicated. Shnai mikra becha targum. What are we even talking about? Says the Gemara. Nah, obviously, this is the case because Ella remez l'treifa she'ena chaya min haTorah minayin. How do we know that when an animal is a treifa, that we treat it as though it will die? How do we know that it's as though it will die? We'll see soon. There's another shita. But according to this mahalach number one, that an animal that is a treifa that we assume that it won't live, mehechatesi, says the Gemara, diktani seifa. What did the end of our Mishnah say? It says, ze'aklal, kol she'en kamo achaya, treifa, michlal de treifa, ein achaya, minallah. This idea that we see in our Mishnah, this is just all furthering the question. If we see the language in our Mishnah, obviously our Mishnah holds of the opinion that kol she'en kamoha b'chaya treifa, that if you have an animal that isn't going to live, it's called a treifa. Where did you get that from? Tichsiv, says the Gemara, v'zos hachaya, v'zos hachaya, says the Gemara, asher tochlu. Let's look at the whole pasuk, vayikra yud aleph. Dabru el bnei Yisrael lemor, zos hachaya asher tochlu mikol ha'behema asher ala aretz. So what's the drush of the Gemara? We have our pasuk, v'zos hachaya asher tochelu chaya echol. If you have an animal that's alive, then that's the type of animal you're allowed to eat after shechita. But she'ena chaya, an animal that while it's alive is not considered to be alive, lo techel. What is that? Mechlal de treifa lo chaya. The animal in the pasuk that is lo seichel, that you're not allowed to eat, must be a treifa. Therefore, we see that an animal that has the gather of a treifa is the animal that is considered to be inedible. Now, our Mishnah certainly holds that way, but there is another track in the Tanoim, as we are about to see, that doesn't hold that way. They hold that a treifa does not mean the animal is going to die. It's a huge nafkamina. So it says the Gemara, Lamando Amar, we're 2/3 of the way done. Lamando Amar treifa chayim and according to the Shita that a treifa is considered to be alive and it's not necessarily going to die. Where do we learn that from? Says the Gemara, Nafkale mi zos hachaya asher tochlu, from the word zos. Same pasuk that we just learned above. It was the same pasuk that we just learned, which was our raya that a treifa is not alive. This person learns, the Gemara doesn't say who it is. It just says ulamando amar that a treifa is chaya, and the marimakom for this shita is, as we will soon see, is in another 10 blot or so. The shita that holds that a treifa is chaya, that it's not considered a foregone conclusion that it's dead. It says the Gemara, nafkalei mizos hachaya sher tochlu, zos hachaya echol, but chaya echeres lo seichel. Fascinating diuk. Subtle, easy to miss. The pasuk doesn't say zos hachaya and the zos is ein chaya. It just says zos hachaya. So the drasha is that there's a chaya that's edible and there's another chaya that's not edible. What is the chaya that's not edible? That's a treifa, michlal de treifa chaya. Brilliant, subtle diuk from the psukim. It says the Gemara, I ve'idach, the original shita, namely the Baal of our Mishnah, the Baal Mishnah that says that kol she'en kamoa chaya is a treifa ve'idach. What does he do with the word zos? Hi zos ma'abile, says the Gemara, the original shita that holds that a chaya, that a treifa is an eina chaya. So what does he do with the pasuk? Mi baile lechadatana de Rabbi Shmuel, datana de Rabbi Shmuel. Zos hachayisher tochlu melamed shetafas hakadosh baruch hu mikol min v'min v'heralo leMoshe. Kadosh Baruch Hu grabbed every type of creature and brought it before Moshe Rabbeinu. V'amar lo zos echol, zos lo seichel. We didn't. With some animals, we knew. With birds, we had no idea. There's animals that were mechudash animals. We have animals now that we're not so sure exactly what kind of animals they are. I think I've shared this in the past, and this actually comes up that there's a certain type of bison that was was cross-mated and it was a super lean animal down in South Africa. And Rabbi Yashiv, but this Shiloh was brought to him. He's like, you should not be eating these things. These are new creates kilai behema, even if it's not the issue of kilai behema. But we don't have a Masorah on animals that are newly created. So we should be eating regular cows, just regular cows. What if they specifically mate cows in such a way that yields a para aduma? So these are already good shilas. Like, is that considered? Does it have to be natural? Can it be an animal? Can it be like Dolly the sheep? That it's how do we do this? Is that fleshik bichlal if you do cloning? But let's say we do find an animal that is very, very close to a para aduma, and we do gene modification, we do mRNA splicing, and we say every single hair has to be red. Does that work? Is it flesh? There's a lot of shilos. Okay. So it says the Gemara, they showed this to Moshe. But Amar Lo, these are the animals you can eat. Ivy Ida Chanami, going back to the other Shita, what do you do with the word Zos? He needs to learn the same halacha. He needs to learn the same exact idea about Melamisha Tafas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what does the other Shita do? Says the Gemara, you're right, in Chanami. And therefore, the source that we said of Zos Hachaya Shir Tochlu is not good for the second approach. Remember, the second approach says that a Shrefa is still a Chaya. But we tried the pasuk of Zos, doesn't work. So now let's try a second answer. How do we know that a trefa is still alive? We have another marimakam from Tana de Rabbi Shmuel to Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, 4 lines from the bottom. Ben achaya nechel, ben achaya shelo sochal. Doesn't say that it's not chaya. It's a chaya that's lo sochel. Elu shmona esrei trefa shenemar l'Moshe miSinai. And this is our marimakom, says the Gemara, that we see that there's something that's a chaya that has a status of trefa. So now the Gemara picks up on something that's interesting over here. What did we just see in Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel? How many treifos are there? 18. That's what Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel says. Look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah didn't have a number. It just said Elu treifos b'beima. So now the Gemara is going to have a whole discussion around the number 18 and whether or not that is considered to be a real number or is it not a real number. Basuleka. Hold on 1 second, says the Gemara. I promise you there are more than 18. Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. Why would you limit the number? After all, Va'ika Baskar, Beis Samech Gimel Resh, which we're going to learn about now. That's an acronym. It's a Rosh Tevis. That it's 4 more cases. Vishev Shmaitza. We also have 7 brisas not brisas, excuse me, 7 memras, Amoraic statements, which also seem to indicate that they're cases of treifa, and we have to go through all of them. You want to talk about the author of our Mishnah? No problem, because our Mishnah, the Tanatana, that he taught Udashir Asyas Bezeh Klal. No problem. Our Mishnah doesn't say 18, so our Mishnah could have the extra 4 from Baskar's 21, an extra 7 from the Meir. Add them all. Zayguzut. Our Mishnah doesn't have a number that we're locked in. But Ella, Latana de Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar Yudches Trefos V'Suleka. What do you do about Baskar? What do you do about Shev Shmaisa? It's interesting to hear this Shev Shmaisa in this frame of reference. It's very, very new to us. I presume that there's a link. It's got to be. It's a very. I mean, we've learned Shas. I've never heard this phrase. You've learned Shas. I haven't learned Shas. I'm almost done, actually. I started with Krisus. Where is that? Is that soon? Where Menachos, so Chullin, Bechoros, Erchen, Tmura. So 4 more Maseches. All right, almost there. Baruch Hashem. So says the Gemara, what do we do about the Yudches? V'ha'ika beis of Baskar. V'ha'ika behema, shenechtechu raglam ino arkuv u'lamala treifa. We have a case, that's the beis of Baskar. And what's unique about animals' legs is that they kind of have 2 joints like knees. They have an ankle. Above the ankle, they have a bend, and then where our knees are, they have a bend as well. So they have more pivots on their. So this is mino arkuba. This is talking about the upper joint. If an animal has their leg cut up there, that's a treifa. So what are you going to do about that? That's the beis of Baskar. So says the Gemara, perhaps that animal is not considered a treifa. If an animal gets his leg cut on the upper joint, cauterize him and move on. The animal's not a treifa; it's an injury.
I was about to ask you, like, it's not internal. Why wouldn't it live for 12 months, even without, as a free life?
Yeah, so it's a machlokes tanoim, because the case of behema is a brisa, a nun zayin. The case of Behema, Shenechtuchu Raglem Minar Kuva Lamal Treifa, look at who the other option was. It's Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who's also a Tana. So what do we see from here? We have a Machlokas Tanaim. If an animal has its leg cut in an accident, so then according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, cauterize the animal and you're good to go. And you can shech them whenever you're ready. We don't assume that animal's a treifa. Says the Gemara, Afal gav di'cholo lichves v'lichios leman ka'amar. According to whom are you saying that you are allowed to cauterize and let the animal live? If you're saying it within Latana debei Rabbi Shmuel, that doesn't help because Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel treifa chaya spherically. The fact that it can live, that doesn't change anything. Living and not living, if it's a treifa, it's a treifa. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. Ella, how do we answer up the case of Behema? Just straight up. Not because you're cauterizing it. He just holds that that kind of injury is not the injury which causes for a treifa status. Remember we said Baskar? Here's the samech of chisaron. V'ika chisaron b'shidra. If you have the corpse, God forbid, of a human, so if you have the shedra in place, the rule of thumb is that with the full shedra, the body is mitame be'ohel. If you have everything but the shedra, that's mitame b'magu v'masa, but it's not tame be'ohel. It's not mitame be'ohel. But if you have the whole spine, so then you are mitame be'ohel. So it says the Gemara Ditnan. We have a Mishnah. We learned this a long time ago. A Mishnah in Eruvin. The Mishnah says, Kama chisaron b'shedra, how much of the spine has to be missing so that the spine, when the person dies, and you find the spine, that it's not mitame ba'ohel. Beis Shammai omrim shtei chulios, beis Hillel omrim chulia achas. B'amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel v'chein l'treifa. So now we see another case of treifa, that if you have a full spine, -2, according to Beis Shammai, or -1, the same rules of thumb apply, that if you're missing a vertebrae, so then the halacha is that you are a treifa. And that's true by animals also. So why wasn't that included? Why isn't that the 19th, according to Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, who said Yud Ches, who said that there were 18 treifas, says the Gemara. No, don't worry. Hamases ubesakosos, 2 out of the 4 stomachs that are part of the cud chewing structure is the kachash vasu betarte. You counted them as 2. No, we count them as 1 chashbinu bechada. And apik chada v'ayel chada, we remove one of the 2 stomachs and combine it with the other. And then we add in a spine that's missing 2 vertebrae, or 1 according to Beis Hillel, that would then be the 19th, now the 18th, because we combine 2 of the stomachs together, and then we're still good to go. Ika gluda. Remember, Baskar, this is the gimel of gluda, just keeping you apprised of all the letters over here. The gluda is a case, look in the Rishonim over here, of an animal where basically the skin kind of got flayed or fallen off. I actually spoke to a doctor, one of our doctors in our shul, who said that there's a side effect of people who have like an allergic reaction to like azithromycin or some type of regular medicine that we take where your skin can like slough off of your body. I'm like, bro, I don't want to hear about this. So that's a case of gluda, whatever the details are, not for now. Says the Gemara, that's not an extra case of treifa. Not everybody holds that way. Maybe the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel that says 18 holds like Rav Meir. Rav Meir doesn't hold that the case of gluda is going to be machshir. And lastly, we said Baskar, here is the Reish, V'ika charusa. Charusa is a case where the lungs are shriveled. Lotov. That's not good. That animal is considered a treifa. Says the Gemara, Mara man ktanila. Maybe we need to look at the Mara, the gallbladder. Who said that? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Apik Mara ba'al charusa. So says the Gemara, maybe we should remove the Mara from our Mishnah, so we go from 18 to 17, and then we add in the case of charusa again. It's musical chairs at this point. We're trying to figure out how to get to the 18. Good. So now we went through Baskar. We went through the case of Behema. We went through the case, all the different cases. Now says the Gemara, what about the Shev Shmaitza? We are halfway down on Mem Beis and Beis. Says the Gemara, V'ika Shev Shmaitza. And we're going to go through all 7 as a punch list. We're not going to analyze all 7 and say, let's take one out of the 18 and add in another one. We're not going to do that. We're going to learn them all rapidly, and then we'll discuss the more broad cases. More broadly, how we fit the numbers. The Amar of Masna, Hi Boka de Atma. This is the ball and socket of the hip. The shaf miduchta treifa. Animal has a dislocated leg. I can't believe that. Dislocation. Maybe it doesn't mean dislocation. Perhaps it means like a permanent injury where it can't be put back in. Not exactly sure. As the Gemara says, that's Memra number one. Memra number two. Laksa bekulia achas treifa. That if you have a problem with one of your kidneys, you're a treifa, utznan, nital hakul kshera. And if you take out the spleen, you are considered to still be kosher. But nevertheless, we see that the kidney's a problem. When it comes to the tchol, which is the spleen, that's only true if it's been removed. But if it stays in the body, aval nikev, that's a treifa. Otherwise, if you remove it, that's an unbelievable thing, by the way. You remove the spleen, kosher. You leave it in and stick a needle in it, treifa. It's nuts. I just have to say something here. The rules of treifos don't function in the way that we would think that they function, and we wouldn't have understood why some of them are treifos. Who cares if your lung is punctured? What does that have to do with anything? Like, who cares why that and not your stomach lining? So it's not. We'll learn. We'll learn this. We're in the parak of Elu Treifos. It's a long parak.
I end up sealing to some extent. Seals them up or whatever. Obviously, it takes care of itself.
Correct. Self-healing. I presume if somebody had a needle puncture in their lung, their body would pretty quickly, I would imagine. Or you die.
Yeah.
Well, you'd get a pneumothorax where one lung collapses and then the other lung takes over. I don't know. When I trained to be an EMT, they told us that when there's a deviation of the trachea to one side, one of the lungs has collapsed. Can't remember which direction it was, so you don't want me to be your EMT, but I forgot a lot of those things. But okay, V'amar Rabba Bar Barchana Amar Shmuel Simanim Shenidal Delu Beruban Treifa, and this is exactly the case I was just talking about. If your simanim, the kana and the veshet, deviate, they're not anchored properly. They're Nidal Delu Beruban. They move around a lot. They shouldn't be moving around. They should be sitting still. There's cartilage around your trachea. We got stuff going on there. They should be sitting still. So it says the Gemara, that's a treifa. V'amar Rabba Bar Rav Shila, Amar Rav Mas Amar Shmuel. Nekra tzela meikara. You have a rib that's displaced. Treifa. If you have a skull that's crushed 51%, that's going to be a treifa. Basar chofa es rov hakeres. If you have flesh that's covering over most of one of the stomachs, berubo, that's also treifa. So says the Gemara, what do we do with these 7? If the Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel is right, that the number 18 is a specific number, what do we do? Okay, you answered up for Baskar, for all 4 cases. That's fine. That's fine. But 18 plus 7 is not 18, it's 25. So, how do we factor in the Shev Shmaitza? So it says the Gemara as follows, 4 lines from the bottom. The way we need to look at it is we consolidate what's in our Mishnah based on themes. What are the themes? Says the Gemara, Nikuve, when we talk about the theme of that which is punctured, Givaldik. Go back in the Mishnah and look at everything that's punctured. Says the Gemara, Tman Yahavu. So 18 minus 8, right? So you're good to go. It's not really -8, it's -7 because there's one category called Nekuva. And Shev Shmaitza equals 18. So it says the Gemara, Nekuva Tman Yahavu, Chashvinu Bechad, all of them are consolidated down to 1, Apik Shav, so then you reduce 7 from 18, you're down to 11, and V'ayil Shav, and 11 plus 7 is the Shev Shmaitza, Givaldik, you have your 18. Yachi, if that's true, that you're going to make themes out of this, well, there's other themes going on. There's psuke nami trei havu. There were 2 cases of things that were severed. If you want to look back at the Mishnah at the open of the Parakam and Beis Medalev, chashvinu bechad and batzar lehuchad. Now you're short one. If you're going to tell me you're going to go in themes, go in themes. You're going to tell me you're not going in themes, you got a problem in the other direction. But don't tell me you have a theme of nekuva, but not a theme of psuka. That's not. Stay consistent. It's not reasonable. And furthermore, the Rav Avir Mishmei, the Rav Nami Nekuvahi. We actually have another case that's also considered Nekuva, at least according to Rav Avira, which would lower the number yet again to too small of a number. Says the Gemara, Elahanach tarte de afkas lo tapid. There were two cases that you took out, which you should not have taken out. So we are going to reduce by two more. We are going to make themes, but two that you took out, you should have left in. Which two did you take out? Rashi, top of Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. Elahanach de afkas behema shenechtu churagla v'hagluda. Those two cases, a couple of the Baskar cases, don't remove them. Keep them in. So, yeah, exactly. Good. Okay. Anyways, we got to the number 18 is basically what the point of the Gemara is. Amar Ula, we have another statement from Ula. Ches mine trefos namru lo Moshe b'Sinai. That there were, it's interesting because the Gemara at the bottom of Membez Medalef says something quite different. It says Shmona Esrei trefos shene'amru Moshe miSinai. But here, Ula, who's an Amora, says Ches mine trefos namru Moshe b'Sinai. So Ula is an Amora. Okay, we have to figure that out. But that's what the Gemara says. And let's see what the eight are. Nekuva, cases where there are punctures. Upsuka, cases where things have been cut through. Netula, cases where certain organs were removed. Vichasura, cases where certain body parts were lacking. Krua, cases where body parts were torn open. Drusa, udrusa, cases where there was an animal that was clawed. Nefula, a case where the animals are where an animal fell, as we saw in our Mishnah from a roof. Ushvura, a case where certain bones are broken. Very vague. From our perspective, it's very vague. Le'afuke lekusa de rachish bar papa. This actually is all true except for the case of Rachish bar papa, who was the second of the Shev Shmaitza. There he said that if there was a problem with one kulia, it's a treifa. So this statement of Ula disagrees with that. Okay? Amar Chia bar Rav, not Rava. Here's where history matters. Rava lived 3 generations, probably 60, 70 years, and they had children young, 50, 60, 70 years after Rav. And Chia, as we know, is always associated with Rav. You see the change on the side here, Tzarech Lomar Rav. And says the Gemara, it's an interesting language of Vinishtabesh bedavar shenivnashti. I don't know. I made a mistake. Some type of sharp language here. Anyways, the Gemara says Amar Chia barav ches trefos yesh benekuva. There's 8 in one. There's 8 in the nekuva alone. So says the Gemara im tomar tes. And if you want to say that there are really 9. Mara, the case of Mara is different. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Ktanilam, we don't hold like him. So in other words, the case of Mara, the gallbladder, if there is a hole that's punctured into a gallbladder, that does not make someone a treifa because only Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda holds that way. We don't hold like him. Tanya, Nikva Hakeva. If this is the Tanakama talking, if we have a hole in the stomach, that or Nikvu Hadakim treifa. This was where Rav Hershel Shechter with the milk, because if you have a puncture in the stomach lining, you're done for. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Af Nikva Hamara, but we don't paskin like him. Good. So that's how the Gemara rejects the Havamina, that perhaps there really were 9, but really it wasn't 9. You might have thought Mara, but obviously Ula, who said that there were 8 things told to Moshe at Har Sinai, doesn't hold that way. Says the Gemara, Halachos Chaver Kezayis Mara Kurkav on Simon. We're going to see a number of 5 different memers from Rabbi Yitzchak, and then we're going to stop for the evening, and Emir Hashem will pick up on Shabbos. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yochanan, Halacha ki Rav Yossi Reb Yehuda. He actually disagreed in the case of Mara, which we just learned. Unlike the opinion of Ula, over here we have the opinion of Rav Yochanan, who taka holds like Rav Yossi Reb Yehuda about Mara. Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yochanan, Mai ahadru lechavrei Rav Yossi Reb Yehuda. What did everybody say back to Rav Yossi Reb Yehuda about the case of Mara? So they said to him, Yishboch la'aretz mararti, reference to a Mara. V'adayin iyov kaim. We see that he's still alive. So obviously, having something happen to your Mara is not going to kill you. Obviously, he's still alive. Says the Gemara, Marlem ein maskirin maisen nisim. Stop. That whole thing was not a normal scenario, and it was all derech nes. If you don't say that we exclude nisim, yiflach kil yosai v'lo yachmol. If there were to be a person whose kidneys were split in half, you think they're going to live? Mikachai? Obviously, that's not the case. Nisa shiny. Dichsi, the pasuk says achas nafsho shemor. Hachanami nisa shiny. So you can't rely on nisim. Therefore, you can't learn anything about Amara. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down. V'amar Rav Yitzchak b'Rebbe Yosef. Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha kedivrei ha'omer kezayis. We paskin like the Shita who holds that there is a kezayis. that if there is a kezias left over of the liver, you're good to go. Otherwise, because you can lose parts of your liver and then you're fine. Good. How could he say that? How can you say that about a liver? We have a stam mishnah. That's our mishnah. It's none. What does our mishnah say? Nitla hakaved v'lo nishtar mimena klum. Hanishtar kshera afal gav delo have kazayis. Our mishnah on the top of Mem Beis Amud Aleph as we opened spoke about a liver, and it said that even if you have none of it, even if you have some of it, even if there's nothing left, says the Gemara. But if there was a little bit left, you'd be kosher even if it's less than a kizais. So how can you, Rabbi Yochanan, say that it's a kizais? Says the Gemara, you're right. I'm a reinin who valid Rabbi Yochanan's machlokas, whether or not we need a kizais in order to save the treifa status of an animal that lost some of its or most of its liver. Ve Omar, right? Always fast to follow the same pattern. This is our fourth memra of Rabbi Yitzchak. Ve Omar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef, and Rabbi Yochanan, Mara Shenikva, if a gallbladder was pierced, the kaved sutmasa. So the gallbladder and the liver are near one another. Listen to this, if there's a hole in the gallbladder, but the hole is covered by proximity due to the body's touching of the liver, how do we view that? The halacha is ksheira. That implies that the puncture of the mara is not about the hole. It's about leakage or transfer, because if the kaved is up against it and you can't, that's a little bit of an interesting implication. And the last member for tonight, and we'll stop with this. What?
How does one know?
That question is a fair question, but
That's the halacha.
That's the halacha.
Or not.
Right. Whether or not they had ultrasounds or MRIs to know that it was nekuva, they had no way of knowing. But if there were landmarks, very good. After the shechita, they picked up the liver from away. They peeled it away from the gallbladder. I didn't even know those two body parts touch each other. I have no idea. It's embarrassing that we don't even know our own bodies, but I have no idea. Okay, I mean, I'm sure they're near each other somewhat, but I don't know. Reasonable assumption. Lastly, for today, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yosef, Rav Yochanan, Nikev, Akurkav, on the gizzard, that's a part of the body that actually crushes up the food, again, in animals. The kis shelo, and this is inside there where there's some type of lining, the kis shelo kayim, then still kosher, even though there's a hole in the kurkavan. And then starting on Shabbos, Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll be asking some questions on this, as you can see. So we're stopping 2/3 of the way down on Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. Yirtzeh Hashem will pick up there on Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.